Parivrajakacharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jainitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 13, The Appearance of Lord Varaha, text number 9. Brahma Uvacha Pritastubhyam Aham Tata Pritastubhyam Aham Tata Swastistadvam Kshitishvaraha Swastistadvam Kshitishvara Yanirvyalikena Hrida Yanirvyalikena Hrida Shadimeti Atmanarpitam Shadimeti Atmanarpitam Brahma Uvacha Pritastubhyam Aham Tata Swastistadvam Kshitishvara Yanirvyalikena Hrida Shadimeti Atmanarpitam. Kshitishvara Yanirvyalikena Hrida Shadimeti Atmanarpitam. Brahma Uvacha, Brahma said, Pritaha, pleased, Tubhyam, unto you, Aham, I, Tata, my dear son, Swasti, all blessings, Stat, let there be, Vam, unto you both, Kshiti Ishvara, O Lord of the world, Yat, because, Nirvyalikena, without reservation, Hrida, by the heart, Shadi, give instruction, Ma, unto me, Iti, thus, Atmana, by self, arpitam, surrendered. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation, Lord Brahma said, "My dear son, O Lord of the world, I am very pleased with you, and I desire all blessings for both you and your wife. You have without reservation surrendered yourself unto me with your heart for my instructions." Purport. The relationship between father and the son is always sublime. The father is naturally disposed with goodwill towards the son, and he is always ready to help the son in his progress in life. But in spite of the father's goodwill, the son is sometimes misguided because of his misuse of personal independence. Every living entity, however small or big he may be, has the choice of independence. If the son is unreservedly willing to be guided by the father is 10 times more eager to instruct and guide him by all means. The father and son relationship as exhibited here in the dealings of Brahma and Manu is excellent. Both the father and the son are well qualified, and their example should be followed by all humankind. Manu, the son, unreservedly asked the father, Brahma, to instruct him. And the father, who was full of Vedic wisdom, was very glad to instruct. The example of the father of mankind may be rigidly followed by mankind, and that will advance the cause of the relationship of fathers and sons. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Caitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam. Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam. Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate. Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapte Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari. Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. Vansha Kalpataru Bhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha. Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're seeing here that Brahma is experiencing some type of pleasure, some type of happiness, which has been a rare thing since his birth. As soon as he was born, he was struck into confusion as to who he is, where he is, what he's supposed to do. And all throughout, at least so far, up to this point in Srimad Bhagavatam, where he has created the first man and woman, Manu and Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Shatarupa, he's experienced setback after setback. So finally we're seeing Brahma is finding some happiness in the submissiveness of his son. So let's take a brief look back at what Brahma has done so far. We know that Brahma, in terms of living entities, he creates 4 different types of living entities. He creates the creepers, the trees, the plants. Then he creates the animals, reptiles. Then he creates the human beings. And he creates the demigods. So here Srimad Bhagavatam is specifically concerned about creation of various different types of demigod-like personalities. We'll talk about that. And as well as human beings. So when you talk about the creation of Manus, then you're talking about the progenation of mankind. First of all, Brahma was very displeased. He was very disheartened because he acts on behalf of Maya, and Maya is one of Krishna's energies. Maya Devi herself, sometimes it's mentioned that she finds it, she's a bit shy to appear directly before Krishna. She's the material energy, Krishna doesn't directly consort with her. And her task is also very thankless. Elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's actually mentioned that the Supreme Personality of Godhead actually doesn't want the living entities to be in the material world. But he creates the material world because the living entities desire it. So the first thing that Brahma has to create is avidya, is ignorance. That's the first thing he creates. And that is something which disheartens him. You'll see at the beginning, I think it was in the beginning of last chapter, yeah, Brahma is really disheartened. Just imagine, you're a devotee, you've done 1,000 years of tapasya, you've seen Krishna, you've seen the spiritual world, you've seen Goloka Vrindavan, the inhabitants there, and now your devotional service is to take people away from that reality that you've seen. So of course, Brahma is feeling disheartened. Here we are in the Krishna consciousness movement, distributing books, giving people prasad, to bring people to Krishna. But Brahma's service is to put, in a sense, to put people into Maya, to facilitate their material desires, to give them material bodies, so that they can play out their material desires. So when Brahma created this avidya, it was very displeasing and disheartening for him. After he created avidya, which is the first principle of this material world, avidya essentially means, in its core means, to forget our relationship with Krishna. Forgetting our relationship with Krishna, which is spiritual, also means forgetting who we are as spiritual beings as well, and therefore identifying ourselves as being the material energy, made of the material energy. After the creation of avidya, then Lord Brahma created vidya, but within the material world, not transcendental knowledge, but vidya in the form of 4 sons. This was his first creation of, you could say, personalities. And they're the 4 Kumars. And I can't remember where I read it. Maybe Gauranga Darshan Prabhu mentions it, or it might have been in Srila Prabhupada's purports in the beginning of last chapter. But he mentions that the 4 Kumars actually represent 4 different aspects of vidya, 4 different aspects of knowledge. First one is Sankhya, then it's Yoga, then it's Vairagya, and it's Tapasya. So these 4 Kumaras, Sanaka Sanandan, Sanatan, and Sanat Kumar, that's a verse in Bhagavad. Okay. So they represent these 4 aspects of knowledge, vidya. So Sankhya, as you know, is the 24 different elements which the material energy is composed of. Yoga is that knowledge of understanding how this material energy ultimately connects, links up with its source, which is Krishna. Then you have Vairagya, which is the detachment from this material world. And then you have Tapasya. Tapo divya putrakane yena sattvam shuddhyad yasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. So this tapasya, to free oneself, to liberate oneself from material entanglement, is also another aspect of vidya. However, real vidya cannot be separated from bhakti. Vairagya vidya nija bhakti yoga shikshartameka purusha purana. Shri Krishna Caitanya shariradari kripam buddhir yastamaham prapadya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach us Vairagya and Vidya. So Vairagya, we just mentioned, is one aspect of knowledge. And Vidya, knowledge of Him, which also entails knowledge of this material world, which is related to Him. But when these 4 Kumars came, as you know, initially they were not pure devotees. of Lord Krishna. Later on, when they were going towards Vaikuntha, they could smell the aroma from the tulsi offered at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. There's that famous verse in Bhagavatam. And that actually made them attracted. From the platform of being Brahmavadis, they actually became Vaishnavas. So their Vidya was not complete at that stage. That's why it's mentioned that Vidya, separate from Krishna, is not complete. Therefore, Vidya appeared along with these four aspects of knowledge. Bhakti appeared along with these four aspects of knowledge, but it was a secondary item. So this was Brahma's creation of Vidya in the form of his four sons. And he asked them to progenate. But they didn't want to. And again, this was another cause of displeasure. Brahma was disrespected. So everything is D. Brahma was disrespected. And then, from his anger came Rudra. And then Rudra, again, he started to destroy his creation. So again, Brahma was disheartened, disturbed. Brahma was disturbed. And then he told Rudra to engage in tapasya. So Rudra agreed. He actually went to the forest and he engaged in tapasya. Before he did that, Rudra was crying, "Who am I? Please designate places for where I should stay." Brahma gave him 11 different names, 11 different wives for each one of the 11 Rudras which came. Anyway, they started destroying the creation, but Brahma told him to engage in austerities until the end of the creation. After that, Lord Brahma created, does anyone know who came after Rudra? No, not before. Manu has just come now. Before Manu, so this is actually sort of like a summary of the last chapter. Yeah, the sages. And this was, the creation of the sages was probably the essential reason why Brahma saw the deficiency in his creation. Because the sages weren't so interested, his Manasaputras, the 10 Manasaputras of Brahma, weren't so interested in progeny so much, not like all of them. Who are they there? Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Daksha, Bhrigu, Kratu, Vasishta, and Narada. So these are the 10 Manasaputras of Lord Brahma. And they came from different bodily limbs of Lord Brahma. So for example, from Brahma, or from his body essentially. So from his mind, for example, came Marichi. Narada was born from the deliberation of Brahma, his intelligence. So he was a transcendental son. Brahma's intelligence was already Krishnized, transcendentalized. So from that intelligence came Narada Muni. So these 10 Manasaputras came. Then after the Manasaputras came Dharma and Adharma. Dharma came from the front. It's mentioned from his chest, where the super soul is located. And Adharma came from Brahma's back. Along with Dharma and Adharma came the 3 gateways to hell, which are? Yeah, Kam, Krodh, and Lobh. Lust, anger, and greed. Radheshyam Prabhu mentions that lust, anger, and greed are the 3 gateways to hell, but actually 2 of these gateways are just secondary gateways. One of them is only the main one. What is that? Which one is the main one? Lust. Why? Yeah. Can you explain how, Prabhu? Okay. So it's a point which is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. That lust which is fulfilled leads to greed, lobha, and lust which is unfulfilled leads to anger. So essentially it's lust, it's kama. And then greed and anger are sort of like byproducts of that. So from the adharma, lust, anger, greed came. Brahma created other things as well. He created the Vedas. So all this is happening before the creation of Shatarupa and Manu, by the way. The 4 original Vedas are Rig Veda, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Veda. So Rig Veda deals with mantras, the different chanting of mantras. It prescribes the chanting of certain mantras for different instances. Yajurveda has to do with sacrificial performances, how to actually perform sacrifices, like cow sacrifices, Ashwamedha sacrifices, like that. And then you have the Samaveda, which has to do with singing hymns, different hymns glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Atharva Veda has to do with rectification of one's mentality. It has to do with prayaschita. So this is the main topic which the Atharva Veda talks about. Then there's 4 Upavedas which Brahma created as well. The main Upaveda that we know is Ayurveda. There's also Dhanurveda, which came from Brahma, which is the military, the art of warfare, how to do it, the knowledge behind that, came from Brahma as well. Stapayitva Veda, which is another Upaveda, which talks about architecture and engineering. And Gandharva Veda, which is the 4th Upaveda. So Gandharva Veda is all about the arts, the fine arts, singing, dancing, all that sort of stuff. It comes from the Gandharva Veda. Then from the Vedas and the Upavedas came the Puranas, the Itihasas, like that. So all this knowledge essentially came from Brahma. Another thing which Brahma created was the Varnashram system, which is interesting because in the Gita, Krishna says, Chaturvarnam maya shishtam. Guna karma vibhagasha. Tasya kartam apimam vidya akarta avyayam. So from Krishna is coming Varnashram. But here we see that it's coming from Brahma. He's creating it. But Brahma himself is coming from Krishna. So because Brahma comes from Krishna and the Varnashram system is coming from Brahma, the Varnashram system originally comes from Krishna. It's Krishna's desire. It's Krishna's will. So then he created the Varnashram system, and then he created the Sanskrit language. I think it was mentioned, the different vowels and the consonants. In some purports before it was mentioned. Brahma created the Sanskrit language as well. Then finally, he sat back, and that's when the point you mentioned yesterday, Ishwaresh Prabhu, about how he was dissatisfied that the creation was not multiplying. Because sages were there, but they didn't want to do anything. Right? There was no woman there for the sages to have a relationship with. Therefore, Lord Brahma created the first woman and then the first man, her counterpart, Manu, to then progenate. And then this chapter is going to talk about that, and it's going to talk about the appearance of Lord Varahadev. But we see that at every step, Brahma encountered problems. Right? And now finally, he's happy. Why is he happy? Because his dear son, Swayambhuva Manu, has finally agreed to fulfill his order, his instruction. He's finally agreed to assist Lord Brahma in fulfilling the directive which was given to Brahma by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like Srila Prabhupada was so pleased with his disciples because they agreed, at such a young age, they agreed to assist Srila Prabhupada in fulfilling the desires of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Right? And in some lectures, Srila Prabhupada actually breaks down and he says, thank you very much. I see you as representatives of my Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada mentions. And also it's mentioned that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to call his disciples as Prabhu as well. He used to see his disciples as masters as well, out of that respect, because they're ultimately assisting him to fulfill the instructions of the Parampara, to fulfill the instructions of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Like that. So in the same way, here we see that Lord Brahma is finally finding some satisfaction, some happiness after a very long time. And this particular verse is focused on the relationship between father and son. And Srila Prabhupada opens up his purport by saying that the relationship between the father and the son is always sublime. Naturally, the father wants to instruct his son in things which are
good for him, beneficial for him. This is very natural. And the son, being younger, having less knowledge, naturally sees his father as authority. Now, if you're fortunate, again, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, your biological father will also be your spiritual master. But for most of us, that is not the case. That's why in the Vedic system, there's two different births, and therefore there's two different fathers, right? There's the biological father, who instructs the son, the daughter, in material necessities of life, right? How to earn money, how to eat, how to take care of yourself, how to take care of the mature body very nicely. And then the spiritual father, after the second birth, instructs the son how to advance in spiritual life. So there's two fathers. So here when we say that the relationship between the father and the son is always sublime, we can also take it that this is also the relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple as well. Essentially, the spiritual master is also the father as well. And this dependence on the father or elders is brought out in the Bhagavad Gita, right at the very beginning. When Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna to bring the chariot in the midst of the two armies, Bhishma Drona Pramukatha Sarvesham Mahikshitam Uvacha Partha Pashaitan Samavetan Kuruniti. Then Lord Krishna just says to him, just see, Partha, all these soldiers assembled on the other side. And then as soon as Arjuna looks, Tatra Pashat Stitan Partha Pitrinata Pitamahan Acharya Pitaran Putras Tathaivacha Pitamahan Shvashuran Soradascheva Sena Yoruba Yorupi. He sees all of his relatives. And specifically, he gets disheartened. Material compassion overwhelms him because he's seeing his elders there. He's seeing his fathers, he's seeing his uncles, and he's seeing his grandfathers, Dronacharya and Bhishma. Katam Bhishmam aham sankhe dronam cha madhusudana ishu bhi paryotsyami pujarha varisudana. They are worthy of my worship. How can I take up my issue, my bow, Gandiva, and aim it at my guru, my martial guru, Dronacharya, who taught me how to shoot arrows? Here I am standing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra with my arrow pointed at him. Therefore he says, Guru nahatva hi mahanubhavan bhunjaya rudira pratignan. It's mentioned. How can I draw blood from such people? I don't want to do that. So that was one of the reasons why he didn't want to fight. He respected the elders. He respected that relationship between father and son. And the fourth reason that he gives for not wanting to fight was obviously the destruction of the family tradition, right? Kulakshaya pranashanti kuladharma sanatana dharma nashte kulam kritsam adharma bhivavati. By destroying the fathers, by destroying the elders, the family traditions will be lost. And then, what will happen? Something before that. The adharma bhibhavat Krishna pradushanti kulastriya strishu dushtashu ashne jayate varna sankara. The women will be unprotected, therefore unscrupulous men will take advantage, and therefore varna sankara will come. Sankara narakaya kulagnanam kulasya patanti pitoryosham luptapindo dakakriyam. Like we do pinda ceremonies here in the temple, right? So people still have that culture of respecting one's father, even though the father has passed on. The fathers are respected, the mothers are respected, because they have given us knowledge. It may have been mature knowledge, but still they've imparted knowledge to us. They have taken care of our body very nicely. So that respect is there. That the father has passed on, let me still think of their welfare wherever their soul may be. And then, doshayrete kulagnanam varna sankara karakai utsadyante jati dharmas kula dharmasya shashvata. Those who are destroyers of family traditions, doshayrete kulagnanam utsadyante jati dharma kula dharmasya shashvata. So this eternal family tradition the culture of knowledge, my Guru Maharaj mentions the wisdom culture, which comes in Krishna consciousness through age. It doesn't come in, it doesn't necessarily come in materialistic life. In materialistic life, as you age, you may not necessarily get wise. You may become more ignorant, because whatever bad habits you were taught or cultivated when you're young, they grow on you. They, you can't get out of them very easily. And then you, as Ishopanishad mentions, that those who profess to be in a position of teachers, elders, to have knowledge, and then instruct people in that ignorance, they're worse than people who don't actually have knowledge, Ishopanishad says. Then utsanakula dharmanam manushanam janardhanam narakya niyatam vaso bhavaditi anushushama. Then such people, they go to hell, and their ancestors, they remain in hell as well, because they stop all these family traditions, the last of which is offering pinda to those who have passed away. So that concept, that principle of respecting the elders and the families mentioned in Bhagavad Gita for us to look at, because it's not so evident nowadays in today's society. Recently I was reading, I started to read Lilamrit again. I think Ishweshwar Prabhu also started as well. And I was reading the first book, obviously, and the childhood section. And it's very nice to see the beautiful congenial relationship that little Abhaycharan has had with his father, Gaur Mohan. It's mentioned that his, I think, was it Krishna book that Srila Prabhupada dedicated to his father, Gaur Mohan? Yeah, so Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada mentions at the start of the Krishna book that this is dedicated to my dear father, who is a pure devotee. And Gaur Mohan, they came from a great lineage of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. It's described in the Lilamrit that his complexion was fair, he was very reserved personality, he didn't speak prajalpa, he kept to himself. And Srila Prabhupada says that his actual business was puja. Although he was maintaining the family, his children, his wife, Rajani, Srila Prabhupada's mother, and he owned a cloth shop, so he was a merchant. I think they came from the wealthy Vanik family, Savarna Vanik family. So it's mentioned that at night time, so that the mice would not eat on his cloth, he would leave a little bowl of rice in the middle of his shop, so that the mice would go for the bowl of rice instead of eating the cloth in his shop. So then he would come late at night, and Srila Prabhupada mentions that the kids, they would be sleeping, and at night time they'd still be hearing ding, 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 and they'd wake up and they'd see the father is still doing puja. So he'd always be in front of his altar doing puja. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that although my father, yes, he was a merchant, he maintained the family, but actually his nitya dharma, his dharma, was actually to do puja. And Srila Prabhupada and his father had such a tight bond. Instead of catching the tram to go into town, it's actually mentioned, Satsvarup Goswami mentions that they would actually walk a distance of about 10 miles or something, instead of paying just a few paisa to catch the tram. So the father and son, they would walk together discussing Krishna Katha. And his father had 3 goals for Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Mohan De wanted Abhaycharan to become a dear devotee of Srimati Radharani, which is a very lofty goal for a father to have for his son. We can see, this is what a real father is. Right? Like it says in Bhagavatam, Jananina sasyad, pitana sasyad. One should not become a father, mother, teacher, be in a position of giving guidance, counsel to others, unless one can deliver the dependence from the cycle of birth and death. So we can just see the mindset that Srila Prabhupada's father had, that he wanted his son to become a dear devotee of Srimati Radharani. And his mother was opposed to that. He wanted him to become an English lawyer. And then Gaur Mohan De was opposed to that. He didn't want Abhaycharan to go to England, otherwise he would be influenced by the Western culture there. So he was vehemently opposed to that idea. The second goal for Abhaycharan that Gaur Mohan they had was that he wanted him to become a great preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Lilamrit mentions that many times it was the culture back then, and it used to happen in Srila Prabhupada's family as well, that at night time the family would go to some other family's house where there will be Krishna Katha. Someone will discuss Srimad Bhagavatam, someone will discuss from Mahabharata, something, there will be a Bhagavad Gita class. And on the way back home, the family would discuss what they had listened during the class, and then at night time they would sleep very peacefully. And in fact, that reminds me, I'm not sure if it's later on in Srimad Bhagavatam, somewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's also mentioned about how Swayambhuva Manu also followed this very same principle. In the glories of Swayambhuva Manu, it's mentioned that he used to wake up early for Mangalarti. The way he would wake up is that he would hire people to actually chant the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's how he would wake up. And at night time, he would sleep in the same way as well. He would read Srimad Bhagavatam, discuss Srimad Bhagavatam. So all this is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam about Swayambhuva Manu's daily routine, about how he kept Krishna conscious. And the last goal that his father had was that he wanted Abhaycharan to become a very expert mridanga player. So even when Abhaycharan Dey was a very young child, he still gave him a mridanga, and it's mentioned that his hands would hardly go to the other sides of the mridanga to bang the sounds, but still he would try his best. And that way we see Srila Prabhupada learnt mridanga so expertly, he learnt harmonium so expertly. Everything came from his father. And now all the expertise that we have in ISKCON, it originally came from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada gave us the essence, the seed, the attitude, how to do it. He gave us the instrument. The instrument is none other than Nityananda Prabhu, it's Balaram. So Srila Prabhupada gave us that. And we have developed that very nicely in ISKCON. Our kirtans are very nice, very attractive. Especially in Vrindavan, the 24-hour kirtan. It's very nice there. So all this is coming from Srila Prabhupada. His mother was also like that, but in the Lilamrit it mentions that whereas his father tended to be very lenient towards Srila Prabhupada, like for example, Srila Prabhupada was known as Kachori Mukhi. When he was a little child, he had a vest with many pockets, so he would go to different vendors and he would wait till they finished making the kachoris, and they'd give him one or two and they'd stuff them in each one of his pockets so that whenever he wanted, he would take them. So one night, he asked his mother, I want kachoris, please make me kachoris. His mother said, no, you're not going to get. You're too demanding. And then she sent him to bed. And then his father came to know. Gaur Mohan Dey came to know. And then immediately he told his wife, no, we should not do that. If he wants something, we should give him. So then he woke up Abhaycharan and he cooked kachoris for him and he gave him that very same night actually. Another instance was when Srila Prabhupada, again as a really young child, he wanted toy guns. He saw some toy guns at the market. So his father said, okay, I'll give you a gun. He got him one gun, and then Srila Prabhupada said, or I shouldn't use Srila Prabhupada, Abhaycharan, he wanted another gun. And his father said, why do you want another gun? I want one gun for each hand. And then he fell on the floor making a tantrum. So his father said, okay, you can take another gun. So he gave him another gun. So we can see the mood that his father had was very lenient, was very liberal. But care can also be shown in a strict way as well. And that was shown by Srila Prabhupada's mother. It's mentioned that her temperament was a bit more fiery, she was a bit more strict in how she cared for Abhaycharan. She once made a vow, when Srila Prabhupada was a very young boy, that she would eat only with her left hand until the day came when Srila Prabhupada asked her, Mother, why are you eating with your left hand? And she believed that this vow would protect her child. Once when Srila Prabhupada was playing with, and of course after some time, Srila Prabhupada did ask her, so she stopped following that, and then she again started eating with her right hand. Once Srila Prabhupada, Abhaycharan was playing with some kids, and they were eating some watermelon, and one of the seeds, Srila Prabhupada actually swallowed one of the seeds, and all the kids started to tell him, now look, now watermelon is going to grow in your stomach. And immediately Abhaycharan came running to his mother. He said, "Lo, I swallowed a seed, a watermelon's going to grow in my stomach." And his mother said, no, don't worry. I'll chant a mantra so that you'll be safe. And Srila Prabhupada mentions, this is my mother treated me exactly how Mother Yashoda treated baby Krishna. We see in the Putana Lila, right? When Putana was killed, then Mother Yashoda smeared baby Krishna with cow dung, cow urine, the dust which was raised by the hooves of the cows, and she anointed each one of Lord Krishna's body parts with different mantras, with different names of Narayan. So in the same way, Srila Prabhupada mentions, my mother did the same thing to me. And one other interesting thing, because we're almost at the time, I'll just quote something from Caitanya Lila. So that's a relation from Krishna Lila, how Srila Prabhupada's mother used to treat him, right? Now here we see an example of how in Caitanya Lila, the relationship between Lord Chaitanya and his father Jagannath Mishra was similar. You can draw some parallel to the relationship between Abhaycharan and his father. Why I'm bringing this up is because Srila Prabhupada mentions in Lilamrit, he mentions that whenever his father used to chastise him or correct him, his father used to first apologize to Abhaycharan. He used to say that, look, I don't wish to do this to you, but I happen to be your father, so please forgive me, but it is my duty to correct you. Because Gormonde knew that he was such a great personality. And we see that also, like when Srila Prabhupada was born, the astrologer came, right, to his, he was present there. And he said that at a very ripe age, I don't know if he gave the exact age, but he said that your son will become very rich, and he'll also become very famous, and he'll travel abroad, and he'll construct 108 temples. So this prediction was given. So his father took that very seriously. Now here's something interesting, which I'll finish with. This is the dream of Jagannath Mishra, which is in Lord Chaitanya's childhood pastimes in Adi Lila chapter 14, which describes to us the pure mellows of fatherly affection or parental affection. On one occasion, this is text 83, on one occasion Jagannath Mishra, seeing the mischievous acts of his son, gave him lessons in morality after rebuking him greatly. So Jagannath Mishra also used to correct his son. We see that Sachimata also used to correct Nimai as well. For example, when she gave him, I think it was bowls of yogurt rice or something, some sweet meats, and then he pushed them aside, and the baby started eating dirt, right? To teach his mother about Brahma philosophy, how everything is one. So his mother was chastising him, and similarly, Jagannath Mishra also used to chastise Lord Chaitanya as well. On that very night, Jagannath Mishra dreamt that a Brahmana had come before him speaking these words of great anger. My dear Mishra, you do not know anything about your son. You think him your son, and therefore you rebuke and chastise him. Jagannath Mishra replied, this boy may be a demigod, a mystic yogi, or a great saintly person. It doesn't matter what he is, for I think he is only my son. So this is what makes personalities like Rohini, Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, Sandipani Muni, I think Akrura maybe also is one of the, I think Nectar Devotion gives 10 personalities. I forget now exactly, but these are the 10 top personalities in a parental Vatsalya relationship with Lord Krishna. So they have that position because regardless of the opulences that Krishna shows, regardless of the majesty that Krishna shows, his killing of demons, they still consider him to be their little child. When Krishna every day used to come back home after killing demons, and Mother Yashoda used to hear of Krishna killing demons, she considered that it was because of the mantras she used to chant. And it was these mantras which were actually the reason why Krishna was able to kill these demons. So she never considered that her son was actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the duty of a father to educate his son in both religion and morality. If I do not give him this education, how will he know of it? The Brahmana replied, if your son is a transcendental mystic boy with self-effulgent perfect knowledge, what is the use of your education? Which is a very important point. If Lord Caitanya already has all knowledge, knowledge is coming from him, then what is the use of giving him instructions? Then, Jagannath Mishra says, Jagannath Mishra replied, even if my son is not a common man, but Narayan, still it is the duty of a father to instruct his son. So even if my son is Narayan, and I know that he's Narayan, still he's my son, and I'm still going to instruct him. In this way, Jagannath Mishra and the Brahmana discussed the principles of religion in the dream, yet Jagannath Mishra was absorbed in unalloyed parental mellow and did not want to know anything else. One other point briefly I could raise is that of Maharaj Anga and his son Vena. His son Vena was not respecting his father, and he was engaged in all mischievous activity. So it did not put him in a favorable position to actually instruct his son. So what did Maharaj Anga do? Immediately he had a sense of renunciation. At nighttime he ran away from the house. So we should see, especially in terms of the relationship between the guru and the disciple, Tadvidi pranipatena praniprashnena sevaya. That attitude of service has to be there. That attitude of submission has to be there. And Srila Prabhupada makes that point famously in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, just see the way that Arjuna is questioning Lord Krishna. He says, how am I to understand? So, as disciples, we should treat our father, we should treat our spiritual master in a way which is congenial, like the point you made yesterday, Yeshwar, about not being selfish. Because if we're selfish, then Krishna, then it puts Krishna in a compromising position, in a tricky position. This person is wanting to develop a relationship with me, at the same time he's having sense gratification, materialistic desires. So either Krishna will wait for some time, or if he's merciful, harishet tad, I forgot that verse, dhanam, he takes away all these impediments. But essentially, from our side, from the receiving end, receiving the mercy of the Father, receiving the mercy of the spiritual master, we should put ourselves in a favorable position so that the Father or the spiritual master will freely benedict us and freely give us our mercy, which the Father is naturally willing to do. But they're just waiting for that impetus from us, from our side. Just as the super soul is freely willing to give his mercy, but he's just waiting for us to first make the first attempt to turn towards him. Okay, so we'll finish here. Any questions, comments? Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.